Hi guys. So today's episode is another murder mystery. This one comes out of the UK. It's actually quite famous over there because it has inspired a lot of, I guess, graffiti work over the years, and I'll explain that as we go through this. It's an interesting case because it also uh, has some involvement possibly with the occult, and that's maybe why this particular case has encouraged a lot of people to not only investigate it, but has kind of maintained this peripheral kind of cult-like interest in it so many decades later. So this article that I'm reading comes from the mysteriousuniverse.org website, and I think that I read about this. I was looking up Nazi stuff, things to do with Nazis and the occult, specifically Hitler's interest in them. And so I was looking up other things, and this case came up, and I just found it particularly interesting. I was considering doing this a few months ago during Halloween time because it was sort of a Halloween-ish story, but not really. I think it's okay for any time of the year because there are a lot of different elements. It doesn't directly have anything to do with, that particular holiday. It's just certain words in it. So anyway, this is known as the Murder and Mystery at Witch Elm. And this article is by Brent Swanser. Okay, so let's begin. There are few things that capture the imagination quite as much as a dark and mysterious unsolved murder. Throughout history, we have seen such inexplicable deaths call out across the passage of time to taunt and befuddle those who would pick throughout the past for remaining clues and vestiges of evidence looking for answers. Yet there are invariably these cases that firmly and unwaveringly cloak themselves in the shadows to refuse to be solved, burrowing underneath enigmatic clues and strange circumstances to remain entrenched and hidden in mystery. One such infamous unsolved crime comes to us from the bloody days of World War II, an era that was no stranger to death. Here we have the sad saga of an unidentified woman, seemingly from nowhere, whose lifeless form appeared within an eerie, spidery tree, ensconced within a dark, haunted wood, her dead corpse holding mysteries and questions we have yet to unravel. It is a murder mystery surrounded by talk of witchcraft, spies, and other weirdness that seems destined to forever be a cold case we will never approach a fuller understanding of. It was in the midst of World War II, as bloody battles were being fought across faraway lands, that four local boys in the English Midlands would stumble across a rather horrifying sight in the Hagley Wood in Worcestershire, near Birmingham, England. At around dusk on April 18th, 1943, Robert Hart, Thomas Willits, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne were trespassing on the private estate for the purpose of hunting for rabbits and looking for birds' nests. Already nervous because they were certainly not supposed to be there, sneaking around, and also because the wood has a particular dark, sinister quality to it, perfect for seeing urban legends of wicked curses or hauntings that all only got worse that night. As it approached, they would soon make a discovery that would go on to become a shocking and profound mystery, still debated to this day. Okay, so that's a painting. It's not the photograph. During their secret excursion, they came across a creepy-looking boys, 15-year-old Bob Farmer climbed the tree to see if there were any nests to be found tucked away within the shadow-laced branches. As he poked about, he came to a murky hollow in the tree from which peered the empty-eyed visage of a skull. The startled boy at first believed it to be the skull of some animal, but when it was dislodged and pulled out from its resting area, it became obvious that this was the skull of a human being, complete with unusually crooked human teeth and a wispy clump of hair that stubbornly clung to a patch of flesh. The frightened boys quickly fled the scene and made up their minds not to tell anyone of what they had found, to leave the dark secret buried within that secluded tree. And so the discovery might have remained a secret forever, the skull rotting away there in the darkness as it always had, if it had not been for the youngest of the boys, Tommy Willets. The experience of seeing that obviously human skull stuffed into that eerie tree had touched a certain chord with the boy, and he did not feel comfortable about keeping the whole affair a dark secret. Unable to sleep due to the nightmares and mysteries that followed it, after a while he told his parents about what they had found out there in the secluded private wood, and the authorities were notified. What they would uncover would do little to shed light on the mystery, and indeed would only serve to deepen it. When police converged upon the scene, they found not only the skull, exactly where the boys had claimed it had been, but also more or less intact skeleton stuffed within the hollow. Upon the skeletal remains were worn out, crepe-soled shoes, as well as a gold wedding ring on the left hand, as well as some tatters of ragged, deteriorating clothing, with the tags seemingly purposefully removed. Within the gaping mouth of the skull was lodged a piece of a type of woven cloth known as taffeta. Interestingly, the right hand of the body had been apparently completely sawed off, but it was soon found buried nearby. It was unknown why the hand had been removed and buried like that, but some ideas at the time were that it was perhaps indicative of some sort of ritualistic killing, or that some animal had gnawed it off and buried it. Okay, so here's the skull, and I guess that's the patch of hair that had been left, and you can see the teeth are kind of long, and I guess from the front view were particularly crooked. These strange remains were sent into the Home Office Forensic Science Laboratory for examination, where they were analyzed by Professor James Webster. He determined that they were from a certain woman who was probably around 35 years old, who had irregular teeth and had probably given birth to at least one child, and who had been dead for approximately 18 months. As there were no signs of any traumatic injuries on the body, the cause of death was thought to be asphyxiation from the piece of cloth that had been stuffed into her mouth. It was also surmised that the body had been placed within the elm tree shortly after death, or as the woman had been dying, and that she had recently had dental work done. Other than that, there was little evidence or information to go on as to the mystery woman's identity or who could have done such a thing to her. A detailed search of missing persons cases turned up no signs of who it could have been, mysterious Witch Elm woman seemed to have simply come from nowhere. The only real clue forthcoming came in the form of a strange report from an unnamed executive of an industrial company. The man claimed that in 1941, about 20 months before the body had been found, he had been walking through Hagley Wood when he had come across the haunting sound of a woman screaming in the distance. The man soon passed another person who also claimed to have heard the eerie screams. Police were called in, but were unable to find any cause for the unexplained screams they had heard echoing through the murk. The investigation was further flustered by the fact that World War II had brought with it an influx of missing persons, which served to muddy the waters and made searching for answers difficult with the limited technology and resources available at the time. In the meantime, the media had picked up on the grim story and begun to splash out headline after headline on the tree murder riddle. And there was talk of murder, shadowy cults, and black magic amongst the local populace. Indeed, the wood had long held whispered rumors of black magic cults slinking through the trees here, and the murder caused talk of human sacrifice and evil forest rituals. Nevertheless, as sensational as the macabre news was of the apparent murder, the people at the time had bigger threats to worry about, such as being bombed during World War II, and so the tale of the Witch Elm soon was sort of forgotten, and the case went quite cold. So this is another painting of, I guess, the public's imagination of the kind of, weird rituals that were supposedly occurring in that forest. In 1944, the case picked up some more attention and bizarreness when some graffiti written in white chalk appeared scrawled on a building in the West Midlands towards the old hill, which read, "Who put Bella down the Witch Elm?" Similar spooky messages began to spring up over the area, saying things like Hagley Wood Bella, giving the same phrase, only sometimes spelling witch as witch, W-I-T-C-H, or calling the woman simply Bella, and they all seem to be in the same block handwriting. It all only served to reinvigorate the whole mystery. No one knew who was writing the mysterious graffiti, for what purpose, or if they had any connection to the unsolved murder. But the name given to the messages stuck, and the woman became widely known as Bella. Interestingly, these messages have sporadically popped up right up until modern times, with well-known examples being graffiti asking who put Bella in the Witch Elm, written upon Witchbury obelisk, and a cardboard placard placed in the Hagley Wood in 2016 saying the same thing. As authorities searched for the culprits of the murder and the graffiti artist in vain, theories as to what had become of Bella began to swirl. One of the spookier ideas was put forth by Professor Margaret Murray of University College London, who was an eminent anthropologist and archaeologist, most well known for her controversial theories on witchcraft, having written several books on the matter and concocting quite a few far-out witch conspiracies along the way. Murray was convinced that Bella had been the victim of some form of black magic ritual, with one of her main pieces of evidence being that the removal of the hand was a hallmark of occult sacrifices, and that in such cases the removed hand was believed to be the occultists, to be a powerful magical artifact called the Hand of munitions factories located in the region during the war. Anna claimed that the spy ring was made up of a Dutchman, a foreign trapeze artist, and a British Army officer. According to Anna, Bella was in reality a Dutch woman named Clarabella Dronkers, who had been either the girlfriend or wife of a German agent and was killed and stuffed into the tree after learning too much of the operation. Police would eventually meet with the mysterious Anna and learn that her real name was in fact Una Mossop, and her cousin Jack Mossop was one of the members of the purported spy ring who had helped in the murder of the woman before stuffing her into the tree out in Hagley Wood. According to Una, her cousin Jack would forever be plagued by nightmares of a woman's skull peering at him from the darkness of the tree hollow. Despite an investigation into these claims by both police and British intelligence organization MI5, no evidence was ever found to conclusively show that a spy ring had been behind the murders, and indeed no real evidence of a woman named Clarabella Dronkers could be turned up. Indeed, none of the alleged spies could be found, although it was not doubted that spies were active in the region. However, it is interesting to note that this Dronkers is said to have had irregularly crooked teeth and is said to have been killed within the right time frame of the events and would have been around the same age of the victim at that time. Other theories as to the mysterious murder also hinge on the spy idea. In 1941, a Czech agent of the Gestapo named Joseph Jacobs was arrested after covertly parachuting into Cambridgeshire, England. Authorities found on his person a photograph of a German cabaret singer and movie star named Clara Burrell. Under questioning, Jacobs would point to Burrell as being a Gestapo secret agent as well, mostly recruited for her ability to speak with a Birmingham accent and blend into the crowd, and who was meant to parachute in and meet up with him later in the Midlands. Although she was fairly well known, Clara Burrell sort of dropped from the radar at about that time, leading to speculation that it was her who had ended up in the Witch Elm. Yet, if this was the case, it has never been satisfactorily explained how she would have ended up out there in a tree in the private woodland of Hagley Wood, or who could have been the one to kill her, or why. Burrell also thought to have been too tall to have been Bella, and she is often listed as having dying in 1942, which does not fit in with the Witch Elm murder. We will probably never know for sure, and Jacobs was put to death by a firing squad in August 15th, 1941, holding the distinction of being the last person ever put to death in the Tower of London. His secrets would go to the grave with him. So this is on, I think it's on the obelisk, but it's something, a piece of graffiti that is still consistently written out there. Who put Bella in the Witch Elm? So this one, since it was done so recently, only 2 or 3 years ago, probably has nothing to do with the actual murderers, but rather just somebody who has kept this urban legend. It's still something that has captured the public's imagination so many decades later. Other ideas as to the identity of the victim is that she was a murdered prostitute, a gypsy killed in some dark ritual, a barmaid who had been killed by a customer, or a woman who had simply been hiding out in the woods trying to take shelter from the relentless German bombings and had run into trouble either of a murderer or wild animals, yet none of these theories seem to really totally fit. No new evidence has really turned up, and over the years, the case has gone as cold as ice. All anyone can do is speculate, further hampering any potential investigation into the matter is the bizarre disappearance of the remains themselves. Shortly after the official investigation was closed in 2009, it was found that Bella's remains had vanished. It was later found that Dr. Webster had passed on the remains after examination to be put through more tests at Birmingham University Medical School, but that at some time during this process they had inexplicably just disappeared. This has caused various conspiracy theorists to claim there is some form of a cover-up being put into effect, but what that could possibly entail remains unclear. All that is known is that their absence makes any DNA testing with modern methods a frustrating impossibility and provides further hurdles to ever getting to the bottom of the mystery. As for now, the remains remain missing. The mysterious murder of Bella of the Witch Elm has remained one of the most enigmatic and impenetrable unsolved murders out there. We also do not know who she was, where she came from, or how she ended up in that tree, since the remains are unaccounted for and that everyone who could have had a direct relation to the crime is dead. There is a very real possibility that this bizarre case will remain forever within the shadowy realm of speculation and imagination. We also have no idea who wrote the graffiti, why they did it, and if they had any direct knowledge of what happened, or if they were just pranksters keeping the spooky legend alive. As of now, the tree itself has long rotted away, and the remains still vanished, and the details of what befell this poor woman lost to the tides of time. The only thing that remains is the scrawled writing upon the obelisk that asks a question that continues to taunt and remain unanswered. Who put Bella in the Witch Elm? We may never know the answer to that, and the indecipherable question hangs lodged itself within the psyche of those who would try to approach it. Okay, so this is, I found it to be a very interesting case because, more specifically, I think just because I love that time frame of the, end of World War II when there was a lot going on, and you kind of couldn't trust anybody because there were so many spies running around Europe and probably the United States too. There was also a huge influx of people who would be former members of the Nazi Party, getting pulled into secret programs within the United States and the UK. And there were just a lot of secrets and a lot of secrecy, and there was a lot of technology and a lot of things happening behind the scenes that nobody ever talked about. And then, bizarrely, part of this same era, there was a strange fascination with the occult. The Nazis specifically were very interested in things having to do with, clairvoyance and psychic ability, and they had, these little side groups that were directly involved with occult rituals, and, with the Frill Society and all of these other things, they were definitely interested. The same members of, high-ranking Nazis were also members of these smaller occult organizations, these kind of secret societies, that were doing all kinds of ritual type stuff, along with all of their overt kind of dastardly acts. So it was just this strange combination of things this particular case is probably all of the above. There are certain elements within this case that make it, uh, you know, I can understand why this became a mystery where people believe there was some sort of occult involvement. The main reason that I think that there probably was almost like a side issue was the way that the body was found, with the one hand taken off with the right hand removed, and stuffing her into a tree. Because, like, if you're gonna commit some sort of a crime like this, no one is gonna take the time to take off a hand afterwards, then bury it separately, and you would never, go through the effort of pushing a body into a tree. You'd have to find the tree, you'd have to do all of this ridiculous stuff. It would be much easier, especially if you're going to bury a hand anyway, is to bury the whole body, then nobody finds it, and it's, end of story. If you're going to actually just do a murder, if that's what this was all about, that just this woman, whoever she was, had gotten into somebody's way and they wanted to get rid of her, you're not going to go through this kind of effort. This effort is bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. And then when you do look at some of the occult beliefs at that time, this idea of taking the one hand off and burying it and then putting the body in a tree. Now, I don't know what exactly those things mean. That Professor Webster, or whoever they mentioned in there, that was an anthropologist and also, interested in occult theories and so forth. She had put this concept forward based on probably the books that she had, read, and maybe local sort of rumors and things like that. Whether this was a ritual to do with the hand of glory, as she calls it, and binding the spirits in a tree so that it can't divulge any of its secrets, that kind of a thing. I mean, there's something to that. It's who knows what the actual ritual was, but I do think this had something to do with an attempt to prevent this person or the identity of this person from ever revealing, whoever the perpetrators were of this particular crime. And I think probably it was because the girl was more than likely some sort of a spy. Now, the other issue has to do with the fact that nobody had any information about the female in 1943. No one knew anything. The boys had found the body. They handed it over to the case over to the police. About 18 or 20 months had passed, based on the level of deterioration. So it was something that happened in probably 1941, 42, something like this. And there was limited information at that time as well, except for the fact that there were some circulating individuals right at that time, but they didn't have any names, they didn't have anything else to go on, other than, I guess, the shoes and a little bit of the clothing, but they didn't have any, method of getting DNA evidence. I don't know what that would have revealed anyway. They might have been able to figure out what was on the cloth that she was stuffed with, but the first thing I would want to know is whose private forested area was that. That should be a little bit significant, who owned the land that she was buried on, because whoever put her there has to have had some knowledge of the area, that they knew where that kind of a tree was, to run around a forest in the middle of the night looking for a hollow tree, or even if you find one by chance, to even decide that that's a better place to bury somebody. just burying them in the ground. I don't think that that's the way it would have happened. It's basically somebody has to have known that there was a hollow tree right there, and would, have to have some level of familiarity with that forest. Now, the fact that maybe locals regularly were going into this area and the actual owners have nothing to do with it, but if they're wealthy owners of a lot of land, many of the very elite families in England were actually Nazi supporters secretly, and so sometimes their open lands were being used as spy meeting grounds because it was private property. They could parachute in, like that one officer said that was his job, and he was supposed to meet a particular a singer, actress, etc., who was working as a spy in that area. And probably I think it's possible that the actual owners of that property should have been questioned a little bit more carefully, because they may have had some connection to this particular spy ring in a sense that they were providing a safe haven area for these guys to meet. And it's possible that if not them, but then someone who knew them or is a frequenter of that particular wooded area knew exactly where to put her. So that, I think, is a little bit significant. I don't think the police really investigated, the owners of the property itself, who owned that wooded private area. Okay, fine. But still, in 1943, 44, nobody knew who she was. Then, mysteriously, this graffiti shows up saying who put Lubella in the Witch Elm. So, you now have a name. It's a specific name. Lubella is someone's name. Somebody thought of that and wrote that on whatever they had written it on, whether it was a tree or whatever in the early 40s. I think that's the most significant clue as to who this person was, because they didn't just come up with a name like that out of nowhere. This was probably the name that this woman was known by. Now, the actress that the German supporter, the spy, said that he was supposed to meet, he said he was supposed to meet, what was her name? Was it Clarabella? And then the other woman who said that she knew who this woman was said that her name was Clarabella Yonkers. Now, if you guys remember, in the Damon Should case, the one where there was a spy who was found in Australia on an Australian beach, and then there was a connection between him and a nurse. That nurse had several different code names or spy names as well, but they were all some version of her own name. So Lubella, Clarabella, Bella, these were all, similar enough names so that the woman would respond if she was called by any of them. So some people probably knew her as Lubella, some people knew her as Clarabella, some people knew her as Bella, etc. And I think that it's the same woman, the actress, who was able to do this particular accent of, was it a Birmingham accent or something? She was able to do a local accent so that she could fit in. So it would make sense that she was a theatrical person, sometimes a singer. This Clarabella Dronkers also used to sing in bars, local bars. She had just sort of shown up in town, but she had this skill set ready to go. So I actually think it was this low-level actress who had been recruited as a spy because she was able to blend into English society, and she happened to have this skill set of being a singer, and so then she would sing in the local pubs and whatnot, and became somewhat well known within that little community. But really, she was only there as a side person, probably somebody who would, meet up and carry things because it was easier for a female to get into certain environments and, be undetected, basically. And it's possible that she just learned too much information, or people felt, within that little spy ring that she, had too, or she might have been crossing sides, or, whatever their reasons were, they wanted to get rid of her. Now, because this particular group of Nazis was also very involved with all of this occult stuff, I have a feeling that not an elaborate ritual was done, but rather just what would be considered a binding ritual, just sort of covering all the bases, sort of, so to speak. I don't think she was a ritual killing. I think she was a necessary killing from their perspective, that she either had too much knowledge of something, or she stole money, or she did not pass certain information along that made her suspicious as being a double agent, something like this. She had to be killed, but, the killing was almost even more carefully protected to ensure that just in case, because they had these other beliefs of this particular occult concept that these spirits can talk, or that this information can somehow come through from the other side, to prevent that from happening. I think a very haphazard ritual was done based on limited knowledge. This seems to be somebody who was just sort of following orders, that this is a way of preventing their identities from ever being found out, is to do the hand binding ritual, and then this particular tree, ritual to complete both of those would prevent her identity from coming out, their endeavors, whatever they were, from coming out, and the identity of the killers, to protect all of that information. Essentially, it did work, though, because we don't have anything really on these people, but it just doesn't seem like there was an elaborate ritual done, or that it was some large, occult kind of sacrifice or something like that. I think it was somebody who was involved with this Nazi, this little small ring, had some occult beliefs and wanted to just kind of cover all their bases. But the killing was done out of necessity for other reasons, and then they disposed of it in this particular manner, just to make sure that from the other side no information would ever come through about who had done it, or why it had been done, or who this particular person was. Because if it was just a straight killing that had nothing to do with these people who already believe in these occult things, they would have just buried the body. But I just feel like these individuals, whoever they were also part of this this flip side of beliefs that were concurring, simultaneously with all of the Nazi stuff. They were also involved with all of these secret societies that believed in all of these things too. And I think this was just an attempt to, make sure that everything was taken care of from both ends, that, on a physical level she was taken care of, and on a spiritual level she, couldn't hurt them in any way. I think that that's probably what happened in this particular case. And whoever started writing the graffiti a year later, or whenever it was, 1 or 2 years later, knew the individual as Lubella. That must have been one of her names, and it could have very possibly been the cousin, the person who was, the cousin of the woman who had come, of Una, who had come through to the police eventually, who said he was having terrible nightmares. And I think he might have been the one to put that information, out there in an attempt to alleviate some of the guilt or whatever he was feeling. And this might have been an attempt to wake the case up and see if somebody could investigate investigate at that time. They may have had a better chance of figuring out what was going on, but nothing really came of it other than the mystery, continuing on. I think the other part that's very suspicious is the fact that her remains disappeared after they went to the medical school for examination. She had some very distinctive features, the crooked teeth and so forth, and that probably could have been identified. I even bet you that if she had had local dental work done, they could probably have found that information as well. There had to have been a limited number of dentists, in that area. Maybe she had had the dental work done some other place, but still, I think that there was probably information available. I think they stumbled into something that seemed to be a government-connected kind of spy network happening right there in the Midlands, and because they were still in the heat of the end of the war, there was still a lot of conspiratorial type stuff going on, and I think that a lot of the evidence was suppressed. I bet you they could have found more evidence right at that time, but I think some of the testimony from the spy who had been killed at the Tower of London, I think some of that was suppressed, and then the fact that the remains themselves go missing, for such a famous case, that is highly unlikely. They would have been more careful about it. I don't think that that just happened randomly. I think that they wanted to make sure that there was no way to identify who this woman was if she did have a child, and the child is surviving, and even had grandchildren by this point, they would have been able to do a DNA test and figure out, who she was, and if they figured out who she was, then they would have known who she was connected to, etc. And I think this was an attempt to protect all of their, their little external ring of people just by completely eliminating any information about who she was in particular. And I bet you it has to do with some elite members of that particular group. That's why I'm saying that maybe the people who are the owners of the land and the estate should be investigated and, find out if they were probably, I think it's very possible that they were Nazi supporters and they were allowing their land to be used in this particular manner as a meeting ground or whatever the case may be, and in this case a disposal ground too. I think that her disappearance, her skeletal disappearance, and a lot of the information that should have been available and easily found even without DNA type evidence, but just like basic information, dental records, and investigations that would have been possible at that time, I think some of that had been suppressed to prevent her particular identity from coming forward, because if it did, I think kind of important members of society might have been exposed, and they didn't want that to happen because, if she was a singer, people knew her in town, they might have known that she had frequented with such and such individual, and then, everyone ends up getting connected. It's sort of a domino effect, and people wanted to just shut this case down and then push it into the realm of this, bizarro occult mystery that nobody has any way of figuring out. And then, strangely, it had caught on in such a way that it's still being graffitied, all over the place. But whoever this woman was, I think that we do have some glimpses of it, that she was a Dutch spy who was able, an actress who was able to fit into English society. She was a singer, both in her former life and then also when she happened to be in England, and she had a couple of spy names that were versions of her own name: Lubella, Clarabella, Bella, etc. And that's probably all we know about her. And she was connected with a small sort of elite group within this network. She may have known too much information, or she may have been somebody she was a double agent, they got rid of her. And, to doubly secure themselves in their belief system, they did a few rituals afterwards haphazardly, um, you know, just to kind of make sure that nothing else gets found out. And whether it's due to that or whether the fact that they, somebody in the government wanted to make sure that no information was found out about her, they got rid of the remains, and any evidence that was useful to anybody was somewhat suppressed. So I do think that there is a little bit more of a conspiracy of important people involved with this particular case, and that it's going to be kept a secret because whether those individuals are alive anymore or not, their families don't want to be associated with, this sort of thing. And as possibly Nazi supporters or double agents or spies or whatever. And I think that that's maybe what was going on in this particular case. But anyway, it's still very interesting. It's definitely an interesting time in history when all kinds of strange things were happening, in England and throughout Europe. Okay, guys, so this was the case of the mysterious disappearance of Bella in Witch Elm. It's also known as, and then I guess the phrase is who put Bella in the Witch Elm. That's a good question, and maybe somebody might still have some information about it, but unless they have something to identify her with, then it will just remain as one of these kind of urban legends or cult mysteries, so forth. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you again next time. Have a great night, guys. Bye.